So I want to talk today a little bit about how to use the default Camunda API connector in order to make RESTful calls. It is not complicated, but it's a little complicated. So let's just dive into it and let's talk about how it works and what it does. So I'm going to come in and I am just going to create a new process. And this process is just going to be very simple. It's going to be create a new BPMN file. Super easy peasy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a RESTful call. Make RESTful call. And then pause for viewing. So the idea here is we're just going to start this process. It's going to make a RESTful call. We're going to have a human task so we can inspect the datum. All right. So in order to be able to use the RESTful caller, you're just going to come over here, click on the gears icon, and start typing in REST. Here's the REST outbound caller, and that's really all you've got to do. Now, in order to actually make this call, you're going to put in the URL. And in this case, I'm going to keep it kind of simple. I'm just doing a GET call. I don't have any security in it. I don't have any query parameters that I want to pass in. And I want to kind of show you how this works, what it does, what it doesn't do. So first and foremost, I'm just going to put it just like this. So I'm going to give this some kind of a useful name. So HTTP caller sandbox process. It's probably a little verbose, but I'll find a way to live with it. So I will deploy it. And then I will run it. And when you take a look at it, you'll actually see here that it made the call, but nothing really happened. So why is that? Well, the reason for that is because we didn't actually say to Camunda that it should do anything with this. So let's go back and make a modification. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to say, well, when this thing comes back, you're going to hold it in my response. Okay, easy peasy. Deploy it, save it. Now, this particular run, this particular process, the API that I'm calling, is just the slightest bit tricky. And the reason that it's tricky is because it's actually returning an array, and the array is a non-trivial entity. So you can see here that when I come back and I look at this, it actually is returning this information here. I get 2 users back with CRUD permissions in the role of pilot and maintenance. That's fine. But, I don't really need like the status and the header and all this other kind of stuff. I really just want to take the payload that's coming back and find some way to interact with it. So how do I do that? Well, so in order to be able to say that I just want the content here, I'm going to come back into my process. I'm going to come back into my process modeler. And on this guy right here, I'm going to say response.body. So now that I've done this, I'll deploy it. I'll run it. Look, you can see that it put it into response.body, but that's not really what I wanted, right? I really just wanted the content. I wanted to be able to refer to the first user and the second user. So how do I do that? Well, it is actually not tricky, but you can't do it thoughtlessly either. So let me tell you what you have to do here. The response.body. So what I'm saying is that, hey, when that response comes back, I want you to take its body content and put it into something. So I will deploy this. run it. When we look at our payload now, here is the content that came back. And it brought back all of the stuff that's a part of the response. So you may be wondering here, first of all, how do I change the fact that it's referring to it as content? And for that matter, what is the relationship between, this my response and body and this other stuff that's kind of coming back? So this is the part where it bears paying a little bit of attention. There is zero relationship between this result variable and this result expression. They are not referring to, they have no interplay with each other. I initially thought that they did because, it makes sense that you would have an output mapping and you'd have like, hey, this is the result variable and this is the expression that defines what goes into it. That is not the case. The result expression and the result variable have no relationship with each other. It's a little bit weird, but it is what it is. So I don't actually even need this. And when I run this again, basically what the RESTful caller does is it actually goes and it looks at the response that comes back and it pulls out all the content inside of it and gives it to me and the way that it was actually defined. So I get like a content, I get a pageable, which is part of the payload that comes back. I get the total number of pages, total elements, the sort. This is all stuff that's actually part of that payload that I was telling you about earlier. So explicitly, it's all part of this. The reason it's called content is because the payload returned it as content. Okay, now if you actually want to get the result of the RESTful call and kind of parse into it and extract a particular element, you're going to do an expression that's a little bit more like this, where we're saying user list is equal to the response that comes back and then its body, and then you actually get into its particular structure. So in this particular case, this is the payload that I'm getting back. And I have something called content. And inside of content, I have two entities with users and permissions and a role name. So this is really what I care about. This is what I'm going to use to drive my process. All this other stuff is really sort of technical metadata that's not germane to what I'm trying to do right now. So if I really just want to get to the response body.content and I want to store that as a complex item, which happens to be an array, then I'm going to write this expression. In my result expression, I'm going to say this user list is the variable that you're going to create for me on the fly, and it's going to contain the response.body.content. I'll do that in a minute. So let me go ahead and deploy this. And then we'll run it, open up the process instance, and you can actually see here that it created user list with the array elements that I wanted. Now, I may want to extract other variables out of this. So for example, let's say for the sake of argument that I also want to get the status of what comes back or the total number or whatever that case may be. If I want to do that, the way that I'll do it is I will actually go to my modeler and in here, I'll write a comma and then I'll say something like my HTTP. Let me see if I can do that over here. Something like my HTTP status, and this will be response dot status, which is the actual status code that comes back. And then just for good measure, I'm actually going to track the result variable that comes back. So I'm just going to call it my HTTP response. Deploy that. We'll run it. And see here that it captured the raw response that came back. It extracted the status variable, which was a 200, and put it into an explicit distinct variable. And then it also gave me the user list, which, for example, I could have in my flow something like, hey, after I make this call, if the status is, sake of argument, check status, TP status is equal to 200. Now, there's something that's a little bit weird, in my opinion, about field, which is that they use a single equal for comparison, whereas most programmers are more comfortable with two equal signs or even three equal signs to do comparisons. But I can find my way through this emotionally, so I hope you can as well. This is just the way this language works. You use a single equal sign, as awkward as that may be. So now we come over here, we run it. And we see that not only did we make a RESTful call here, but within each one of these guys, we got variables that are useful to us, and we're actually able to use those variables in the context of modeling our process. So this to me makes it very easy to interact with RESTful APIs as a part of your process. And frankly, I think 90% of what you're going to be doing is really kind of geared around this. So I hope this has been useful to you. Thanks very much for taking time to watch.